Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're diving into the world of AbbVie. They're a biopharmaceutical company that's been through some pretty major changes recently.
Yeah, they've had quite a journey. A lot of people might not recognize the name AbbVie immediately.
They have definitely heard of Humira, right?
Exactly. Humira has been kind of their claim to fame,
For years, it was like the world's best-selling drug.
bringing in billions and billions for AbbVie.
But then things changed, didn't they? The patent cliff came along,
The U.S. patent expired in 2023
and that opened the door for competition.
from biosimilars, which are basically cheaper versions of Humira.
And how has that affected them?
Well, global sales for Humira have plummeted, something like 35.2%.
Wow, that's a huge chunk of their revenue.
Yeah, over a third of their sales from just that one drug are gone.
So what did they do? I mean, how do you come back from that?
Well, they decided to diversify.
I invite shopping.
They acquired Allergan in 2019.
That's where things get interesting.
That brought a very well-known product into their portfolio.
Botox,
That's right.
the wrinkle remover,
Yeah, it might seem a little strange.
like going from treating chronic diseases to helping people look younger,
It's a big shift, but it was a strategic decision.
to tap into a whole new market.
Exactly. The global aesthetics market is huge and growing rapidly.
So it's not just about wrinkles, it's about a business opportunity.
Absolutely.
But Botox wasn't their only acquisition, was it?
No, they also acquired a company called Cerevel Therapeutics.
And what do they do?
They focus on treatments for neurological conditions, like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Wow, so they're really diving into some complex areas.
Then there's ImmunoGen.
Another acquisition.
They're all about developing cancer therapies.
So they're branching out into oncology and neuroscience.
Yeah, two fields with a lot of potential, but also a lot of risk.
It's a high-stakes gamble, for sure.
They're definitely making bold moves.
So with all this spending on acquisitions, how are their financials looking?
Well, it's a mixed bag. In the third quarter of 2024, their total revenue increased by 3.8%, hitting $14.46 billion.
That sounds pretty good.
But it's important to look at operational growth, too, which strips out the effect of things like currency fluctuations.
So that's more like their core business performance, right?
Exactly. And their operational growth for the quarter was even better, 4.9%.
Okay, so revenue's up. What about earnings?
Adjusted earnings per share, which excludes one-time expenses, grew by 1.7%, reaching $3. But their GAAP earnings, which includes all expenses, actually dipped by 12%, down to 88 cents.
That's a pretty big difference. Why the discrepancy?
It's likely due to the costs of their acquisitions and restructuring.
So those one-time hits can really skew the numbers?
Exactly. It's something to keep in mind.
But overall, are they financially stable? They must have a ton of debt.
They do have a lot of liabilities, over $137 billion, actually. But for a company their size, it's not unusual.
So they're not about to go bankrupt anytime soon.
Not like.
But they did recently raise their 2024 earnings guidance between $10.90 and $11.14 a share.
Yeah, it seems optimistic given everything we just talked about with Humira.
Right. But it does show confidence in their future, I guess.
They seem to believe their new acquisitions and growth areas will compensate for those Humira losses.
They've got a plan, and they're sticking to it.
It seems that way.
Of course, there's been a change at the top, too.
The longtime CEO, Richard Gonzalez, stepped down in July,
After more than a decade leading the company.
and Robert Michael, the former president, took over.
New leadership, new direction, maybe.
It'll be interesting to see what changes he brings.
And how Wall Street reacts, right?
Yeah.
The stock market loves to react.
Well, the stock did hit an all-time high of $203.87 back in October.
This year,
But then it took a bit of a dive.
down 11.5% in just a month.
There was even a 4.2% drop in a single day.
Ouch.
This was after news broke about increased biosimilar competition for Humira.
So despite everything else they're doing, Humira is still hanging over them.
It's a major factor in how investors view the company.
It makes you wonder if they'll ever truly escape its shadow.
Well, that's a question for another time. We've covered a lot of ground here.
From Humira's decline to Botox, brain research, and cancer drugs,
And everything in between.
AbbVie is at a crossroads.
Trying to reinvent themselves.
They've got a lot of challenges ahead.
But also a lot of potential.
It's a fascinating story, and it's far from over.
That's for sure.
So to understand this company better, what should we be looking at going forward? What are the key things to watch?
Well, the performance of their newer drugs is crucial. Can they truly become the next Humira?
And their acquisitions. Will they pay off?
Exactly. Can they integrate those companies effectively and create value?
And then there's the regulatory landscape, which you mentioned is getting tougher.
It's a big hurdle for any pharmaceutical company. AbbVie needs to navigate that carefully.
It sounds like there's a lot to consider. Risks, rewards, opportunities.
It's what makes this company so interesting.
So to really understand what's happening with AbbVie, we need to go deeper into those specific areas they're pursuing: oncology, neuroscience, and aesthetics.
And that's exactly what we'll do next. So let's delve into oncology first. It's a massive field, constantly evolving, and AbbVie has made it pretty clear they want to be a major player.
Okay, but what does that actually look like? What are they doing to make that happen?
Well, they're targeting a variety of cancers, blood cancers, solid tumors, you name it.
And how are they approaching this? What's their strategy?
Well, remember ImmunoGen, the company we talked about earlier?
The one they acquired.
Right. They specialize in something called ADCs, antibody-drug conjugates.
ADCs, that sounds a little complicated.
They're actually pretty fascinating. Imagine, like, a guided missile that delivers a powerful chemo drug directly to the cancer cells.
So it's much more targeted than traditional chemo.
Exactly. Traditional chemo can damage healthy cells along with the cancerous ones.
But with ADCs, you're basically hitting the cancer cells directly.
Precisely. It's a much more precise approach.
And that's what ImmunoGen brings to the table.
Yeah, they're a leader in ADC technology, and AbbVie is clearly betting on that.
Okay, so that's oncology. What about neuroscience?
Yeah.
They're tackling some pretty challenging conditions there.
They are. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, these are incredibly complex diseases.
And there's no easy fix.
Not at all. But Cerevel Therapeutics, the company AbbVie acquired, is working on what they call next-generation therapies.
What does that even mean? Next generation.
Well, they're focused on targeting specific brain circuits that are involved in these disorders.
Wait, how do they know which circuits to target? The brain is like the most complicated organ.
That's where the next generation part comes in. They're using advanced imaging techniques and genetic analysis to pinpoint the specific pathways that are malfunctioning.
So it's like a whole new level of precision medicine.
Exactly. Instead of just treating the symptoms, they're going after the root causes of these diseases.
That's incredibly ambitious.
It is. But if they can pull it off, it could revolutionize the treatment of these conditions.
So we've covered oncology and neuroscience. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, aesthetics. How does Botox fit into all of this?
Well, it's all part of AbbVie's diversification strategy. Remember, they want to expand beyond their traditional focus.
So it's not just a vanity thing, it's a strategic business decision.
Exactly. The aesthetics market is huge and growing, and Botox is a major player in that market.
But is there any connection between Botox and their other therapeutic areas?
Potentially, yes. There's some interesting research being done on using Botox for things like migraines and muscle spasms.
So it could have applications beyond just wrinkles.
Absolutely. It's a versatile product with a lot of potential uses.
Okay, so we're starting to see a clearer picture of AbbVie's transformation here. They're moving beyond Humira, investing in these new fields and taking some risks.
They're building a new identity for themselves, a company that's not afraid to push the boundaries.
But there's still a lot of questions. Can they really succeed in these complex areas?
Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, AbbVie is not standing still.
They're taking charge of their future, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens next.
It's a high-stakes game, but the potential rewards are huge.
And that's what makes this such a fascinating story to follow.
It is. We're watching a company in transition, trying to reinvent itself for a new era of healthcare.
It's a story about innovation, risk, and the relentless pursuit of progress.
And we're just getting started.
So we've got AbbVie, this company that's been so reliant on Humira, trying to carve out a new path for themselves.
In these really cutting-edge fields like oncology, neuroscience, even aesthetics.
They're making these huge bets, acquisitions, going head-to-head with some of the biggest names in the industry.
It's exciting to watch, but also a little bit nerve-wracking.
Like, will it all pay off? What should people be paying attention to as this story unfolds?
Well, I think a big one is the performance of those newer drugs, especially the ones in oncology and immunology. You know, Skyrizi, Rinvoq.
These are their potential future blockbusters, right? The ones they're hoping will replace Humira eventually.
Exactly. The early data looks promising, but it's still too soon to tell.
And those acquisitions, billions of dollars spent, how can we tell if those were smart moves?
Look for integration, synergy. Are they actually taking advantage of those companies they acquired, their technology, their expertise?
So are they developing new treatments as a result? Is it more than just buying companies and adding them to the portfolio?
Right. It's got to be about creating value, not just expanding for the sake of it.
And of course, we can't forget the whole regulatory side of things. You were saying earlier how it's becoming tougher for drug companies.
It's a huge obstacle. Getting those new drugs approved, it's a long and expensive process.
So AbbVie has to be smart about navigating that whole system.
Absolutely. It can make or break a company.
So they're facing these challenges from all sides: competition, regulations, pressure to innovate.
But they do have some advantages, too.
Like?
Well, they've got a pretty strong track record. They know this industry inside and out.
And they're willing to invest, that's for sure.
So it's a balancing act. Risks and rewards, challenges and opportunities.
A lot of uncertainty, but also a lot of potential.
That's what makes them such a fascinating company to watch.
It really does feel like we're seeing a company reinventing itself, trying to become something new.
Will it work? Only time will tell.
It's going to be an interesting ride, for sure. And that's what I love about the deep dive, getting to explore these stories.
Understanding the complexities, the trends, shaping the industry, healthcare.
Exactly. So, to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of AbbVie.
Keep asking those questions. Stay curious.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.